Benji is my younger brother's best friend. They went to school together. He is a really intelligent and incredibly funny person. Although I've seen him be a total dumbass, he's pretty cool. It had been a bright sunny spring afternoon and I was with my brother, his girlfriend and Benji in a bar on the outskirts of the city which would later be a hipster bar, but then was a totally rad place with LGBT security and crazy mad drunken patronesses dancing at the end of the bar. The music was never that good there. It was just a local transient underground bar which was only there a few months before getting reconstructed. It relocated nearby about 1 year later. We had met my brother's girlfriend at the bar. Beforehand, Benji had recounted two strange stories to us. He had already told my brother these stories. One of the strange experiences occurred to him whilst he was in the Navy. My brother had told me briefly what had happened, however it was too intriguing to my imagination, and I asked Benji for more details. "Hey man, tell me about the time when you were in the Navy, when you saw that thing come out of the water," I asked him. "Man, that was some crazy shit," he replied. "Did your brother tell you about that?" "Yes, but his story is secondhand," I said. Benji was slightly reluctant to get into what happened. He did not attach that much importance to the event, but he knew I believed him. He looked at me squarely in the eye, yet at the same time squinting and gauging my response from beneath his eyebrows in the manner of my countrymen. When I was in the Navy, we'd been out on patrol way past Christmas Island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Our ship wasn't too large. I was on point duty, which is basically monitoring the outside of the ship and what is going on around from the bridge. And it's the easiest job to do because I couldn't do anything. Benji was actually part of a boarding squad which went onto any vessels he was instructed to, and this duty was a secondary role. He was being self-depreciated. It was about 3 AM in the morning. There were other people on the bridge with me. They were monitoring different instruments in the radar, and there was someone else steering, but they were on instruments mainly, because it was pretty dark out there, you know, and there was heaps of stars every night normally. I was the only one who had binoculars, and I was, just hanging out on my stool with binoculars, looking out, scanning the horizon. Then all of a sudden, this massive glowing object flew out of the ocean and into the sky. It literally took 3 seconds and it was gone. I pressed Benji for more details. It looked just like another star when it disappeared in the sky. It was a bright blue color. When it flew across the bow, it was just massive. Way bigger than our craft, way bigger. Like 3 football fields. The light flooded inside the bridge and over everyone's desks and instruments. They asked me what had happened, because no one else had been looking out at that moment. But everyone had seen the light inside. It was pretty bright. I told them what I saw and I asked if I should report it as an incident. They told me it's better probably not to. So yeah, then I just sat back in my stool and kept watching. The thing was, it was so massive after it left the sea, the waves from its wake moved the whole ship I was in, and you could hear them breaking against it and make us go up and down. And it was a fair-sized ship too, actually. That was pretty much the only thing I ever saw, apart from some lights in the distance once or twice, but everyone sees that. The Navy's complete lack of response is understandable, however one would imagine that a catalogue of sorts might be appropriately maintained. It is interesting that when the missing flight MH370 was lost, an entire survey of the seaboard in this area was performed by the Navy over a period of several months, at the instigation of the international community. Ostensibly this was to find a plane that had downed thousands of miles elsewhere, but there could be implications between these two stories about something mysterious. Anyway, that's not the story you wanted to tell you, prompted my brother, interceding. "Okay, tell me your story, man," I said to Benji. "Well, alright, but before I tell you, you have to swear to believe me." This was possibly irrelevant, and we sounded like 10-year-olds going on a hike through the wilderness. "What difference does it make?" I asked him. "Just swear it," he said. And I did. So remember how that thing just happened to you and your brother, and nobody would believe it at the hospital, and you know it was true, because you were there when it happened and you both saw it happen, right? Don't worry, man, I will believe you. Benji began the story. Well, my brother saw this happen, and he totally swears that it happened, and I believe him. Listen to this, said my brother. He wasn't lying when he told me about this, it wasn't a joke. If you heard him tell this story, you would believe him. He will swear on anything that it was true. It's true, said my brother Philip. There's no way he could be lying. I saw it in his eyes. His conversation was beginning to sound more and more as though we were casually shooting marbles with slingshots at tin cans in Somali. However, there was an underlying sense of seriousness which I couldn't deflocate. What happened was indeed a highly unusual event. It is only occasions that are witnessed by more than one person that one can possibly tell such stories. The most significant proof regarding this strangeness, in terms of my own experience, is not the testimony of the people who were immediately involved, but the physical response to our own environment which we experienced at my apartment before we walked to the bar in the afternoon, and later at the bar also. Because Benji was satisfied with the preliminaries, he could continue. Well, it was like this, alright. My brother had been crashing with two of his mates in his mate's house. He had his own separate downstairs area where the pool table was. They were smoking and drinking because his parents were out. This was after they had finished their school certificates, but they were still young. It was a Friday night and they were just playing pool and Sega Mega Drive and eating pizzas. Eventually at about 11:30 they were sitting around the television with my brother and his mate, the one who owned the house, on recliner chairs. The other guy got tired, so he lay down on a couch which was right next to the television and fell asleep. They were having drinks of straight scotch and had switched off the Mega Drive, but the television was still on. It was only showing static, like TVs did in the olden day when you left them on but had turned the console off. It was a little while later, about 12:15 or something, when their mate who had crashed started making noises in his sleep. It was quieter at first, as though he was muttering from the distance, but as it became louder and louder they realized he was having a nightmare. They were just talking to themselves about what they should do when his muttering became more intense, causing them both to look up. Then they saw this happen. Something came out of the TV. Honest to God, no shit, something for real came out of the television, like a huge eyeball. I was dumbfounded, but I managed to press him immediately for further details. Was it solid? It wasn't solid, it was there, but more like it was made of electricity that came out of the static and kind of similar to that. My brother said he and his mate just sat there in shock, looking at this gigantic eyeball. The guy on the couch was shouting from his dream. The eyeball moved around the room, looking firstly at my brother and his mate, and then at their other mate on the couch. Then it sucked itself back into the TV. The instant that the eye went back into the TV, the guy sleeping on the couch abruptly awoke from his nightmare and sat up. They couldn't speak for a bit, but when they asked if he was okay, he said he was fine and did not seem to understand their concern or remember the nightmare he had been having. My brother and his mate that had been sitting on the couch decided not to tell their third mate who had been sleeping about what they saw. But then, after that time, my brother never fell asleep in the same room as a TV set. He gave me his TV set after that. Benji's eyes had widened during the tale, and they became more gentler again. Yet, around us, in that room in my apartment, I felt a magnetic field develop which was very odd and quite apparent. Hey man, I can feel something magnetic around us. Do you feel it? Yes man, I do, said Benji. My brother had remained silent. It's almost as if the energy of that thing travelled through the story, I said. For a couple of moments it was difficult to gain perspective and I had a feeling of vertigo. I suggested we leave then for the bar and wait for my brother's girl to meet us there. I wanted to get away from that magnetic field. So we had slowly walked to the bar and later my brother's girlfriend joined us there. My brother and his girlfriend became engrossed in each other's conversation as they normally did, and Benji and I had begun talking to two UK girls who were really nice and sitting beside us. We had just enough beers to feel exuberant enough about life, and the strange stories which Benji had told me began to circulate in my head. I think the conversation had started to tend towards the paranormal because one of the girls had a ghostly encounter of sorts when staying in an old hotel in the country earlier in the month. They were best friends and had travelled from England together, and their stories were quite engaging. Benji glanced at me. I had the feeling he wouldn't mind telling the eyeball story, but not the UFO one. I looked at them perhaps with a beer-glazed level of eccentricity, and told them that Benji had recounted a story today wholly unique and crazy. I told them what was so weird about the story was something that we had experienced after he'd finished the story, and I wondered if somehow this thing existed or communicated itself or even lived within our thoughts. And for that reason, I was probably unwilling to recount the story. I looked at them, and perhaps the beer had glazed a level of eccentricity, and I told them that Benji recounted a story today wholly unique and crazy. I said that what was so weird about the story was something we had experienced after we'd finished the story, and I wondered if somehow this thing had existed or communicated itself or even lived within our thoughts. And for that reason, I was probably unwilling to recount the story. This left the girls curious and dismayed, so Benji offered to tell them that story. I was actually uncertain that he should. However, they insisted despite my warning, because this had only increased their curiosity further. Benji recounted the same tale he had given me earlier that afternoon, and at some point my brother Philip began hearing the story. His girlfriend wanted to know what it was all about, but he told her not to worry, and they resumed their conversation. Between all of us, I began to feel that magnetic field again. It was quite strong. It made the other sounds around you grow fainter. It had a specific feel to it, like it was pressing the air around you. What was compelling at this moment was the bracelets both the girls were wearing became magnetized. Metal objects were sticking to the bangles they wore on their wrists. It became apparent because one of the girls was gesturing with her hands and there was an unlit cigarette that she was holding, and the proffered lighter accidentally contacted the jewelry and remained stuck to it. The effect remained for a few minutes. It was really odd. Both these girls were qualified jewelers, and I believed them when they said that this had never happened before. Twice there had been a physical response to this story being told, and the second time the evidence was unmistakable. Later that evening, my brother and his girlfriend had left to spend time together, and I had taken Benji and the two UK girls to my favourite Sunday night place. It was perfect weather and nice. That evening I had met a few beautiful and interesting people in that bar with whom I retained friendships for many years afterwards. I've never tried telling people about this story, either because in case it generated a magnetic field, or because it is far too improbable to explain.